My name is Tori Thatcher, and I'm 32 years old. 5 years ago, 3 days before Thanksgiving, my mother called me and said 7 words that shattered everything I believed about family. Don't come home this year. Victoria doesn't want drama. No explanation, no apology, just a clean, brutal dismissal of 27 years spent trying to belong. That Thanksgiving, I sat alone in a restaurant in Boston, poking at a lukewarm turkey dinner while families around me laughed and passed plates. I smiled at the waitress, blinked back tears, and told myself I was fine. I had no idea that the strangers at the next table would change my life. I had no idea they would become the family I'd always wanted. And I certainly had no idea that 5 years later, at my wedding, they'd be introduced as the parents of the bride, while my biological parents watched from a distance, uninvited, finally understanding what it meant to be replaced. Before I get there, let me take you back to the phone call that started everything. It was November 21st. I remember because I'd been trying so hard to feel festive. I was standing in my tiny Boston studio, half-packed bags on the floor, a pumpkin-scented candle burning on the counter. My flight to Connecticut was booked, non-refundable. Mom's name lit up my phone. I smiled when I answered. "Hey, Mom, I was just about to." "Tori," her voice was flat, distant, "I need to tell you something." My stomach dropped. That tone never meant anything good. "What's wrong? Is Dad okay?" "Your father's fine." A pause, then, "I don't think you should come home this year." I laughed, actually laughed, because it sounded absurd. "What do you mean?" "Victoria doesn't want drama. She's pregnant again, and she doesn't need the stress." My fingers tightened around the phone. "Drama? I haven't spoken to Victoria in months." "Exactly," Mom said sharply, "and we'd like to keep it that way. You know how you get." "How I get?" My voice cracked. "Mom, all I did was ask her last year why I wasn't invited to her baby shower." "And that's the problem," she snapped. "You always make everything about yourself." I stood there, frozen, watching snow drift past my window while my mother told me I wasn't welcome at Thanksgiving, for daring to ask why I'd been excluded. "I already bought my ticket," I said quietly. "Then get a refund," she replied. "Victoria is pregnant. She doesn't need stress. You understand, don't you?" The line went dead. I understood perfectly. I always had. As I sat on the edge of my bed staring at a useless plane ticket, memories came rushing back, years of small, sharp disappointments I'd learned to swallow. My 16th birthday, I'd planned it for months, cake, bowling, 3 friends. That morning, Victoria called crying because she'd failed a calculus exam. My party was cancelled. "Don't be dramatic, Tori, your sister needs us more right now. We'll celebrate next weekend." We never did. Then my college graduation, 4 years of late nights, part-time jobs, and ramen noodles, first in my family to graduate with honors. I scanned the crowd from the stage. Their seats were empty. They arrived 2 hours late. Victoria had a prenatal appointment that couldn't be rescheduled. "You understand," Mom said, "your sister's baby is more important than a ceremony. More important than me." She never had to say it out loud. I always heard it anyway. So I stopped protesting. Stopped asking. Stopped taking up space. "Don't be so sensitive. Why do you always make everything about you? Can't you just be happy for your sister?" I tried. I made myself smaller, quieter, easier to ignore. I believed that if I asked for nothing, maybe someday I'd finally be chosen. At 27 years old, sitting alone in a cold apartment, I finally understood the truth. There was no version of me small enough to earn their love. I called my father anyway. Some foolish part of me hoped he'd fight for me, just once. He answered on the 4th ring. "Hey, kiddo." I could hear the TV in the background. "A football game." "Dad, did Mom tell you?" A pause. "She mentioned it. And you're okay with this? You don't think I should be allowed at Thanksgiving with my own family?" Another pause. "You know how your mother is," he said. "She's just trying to keep the peace. By excluding me." "It's not like that." "Then what is it like, Dad?" My voice shook, because it feels like you're choosing Victoria over me. Again. Silence. Do you even want me there? 5 seconds passed, then 10. I think it's best if you listen to your mother this year. Something inside me shut down, not with anger or tears, but with a hollow finality. Okay, Dad. Tori, don't be. I hung up. He never called back. That night, as the apartment darkened and the candle burned out, something else settled in too. A decision. If I wasn't welcome at their table, I would build my own Thanksgiving. We saved you a seat. That simple sentence turned into a ritual. Sunday after Sunday, I found myself at the Morrison dinner table. Richard taught me chess, patiently explaining strategies even though I lost every single game. Eleanor shared her secret pie crust recipe, the one she claimed lived only in her head. Daniel's kids started calling me Aunt Tori, as if it had always been that way. And Marcus became my friend, not the casual kind, but the real kind, the kind who texted me half-formed thoughts at 2 in the morning, argued passionately about movies, and always seemed to end up sitting beside me at dinner without anyone arranging it. My biological family disappeared completely. No calls, no texts, not even a holiday card. For the first time in my life, I stopped waiting for their attention, because for the first time, I wasn't performing to be loved. I wasn't shrinking myself to fit into someone else's comfort. I was simply loved. It felt like coming home. About 8 months after that first Thanksgiving, Eleanor and I were sitting on her back porch one spring afternoon. The garden was waking up, tulips pushing through the soil, birds bickering at the feeder. Inside, Richard and Marcus shouted at the TV, caught up in a game. Have you heard from your parents? Eleanor asked gently. I watched a robin settle on the fence. No, and I haven't reached out either. She nodded, no judgment in her expression. Do you want to? I thought about it, really thought about it. Sometimes, late at night, I imagine calling my mother, trying one more time to explain how much she hurt me. Then I remember there's nothing to explain. She knows what she did, she just doesn't believe it was wrong. That's a painful truth, Eleanor said softly. I hugged my cardigan tighter. I keep waiting to feel guilty. Everyone says you should forgive family no matter what. Blood is thicker than water. Eleanor smiled faintly. I've never believed that. She sipped her tea. In my work, I helped people secure legal recognition for the families they chose, not just the ones they were born into. I turned toward her. What do you mean? That the law often recognizes what the heart already knows, she said. Family can be created, and sometimes, it can be made official, if someone wants that. I didn't fully understand then. Not yet. Just something to think about, Eleanor added, patting my hand before changing the subject to tomato plants. But her words stayed with me. They took root quietly, waiting for the right moment to bloom. That moment arrived almost without announcement. 2 years after our first Thanksgiving together, Marcus and I were no longer just friends. What grew between us did so slowly that acknowledging it felt less like starting something new, and more like naming what had always been there. He asked me to dinner at Harborview Grill, the same restaurant where we'd met. This feels poetic, I said as I slid into the booth. That's why I chose it. He was nervous, I could tell by the way he kept adjusting his napkin. I wanted to bring you back to the beginning, he said. The beginning of what? He reached across the table and took my hand. Tori, I've spent months trying to find the right words. He inhaled. I want to spend the rest of my life choosing you, every single day. My heart stopped. I know your family hurt you, he continued. I know you're afraid of being abandoned by people who are supposed to love you. His gaze never wavered. But I'm not leaving. I never have. He opened a small velvet box. Tori Thatcher, will you marry me? I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. I saw my future in the man who had been my friend before anything else, my safe place through 2 years of healing. Yes, I whispered, yes. He slipped the ring onto my finger, and the restaurant erupted in applause. I hadn't even noticed we had an audience. Then I saw them in the corner booth, Richard and Eleanor, glasses of champagne already raised, smiling like they'd known all along. Mom couldn't keep the secret. Marcus laughed. I was going to officially become a Morrison. Wedding planning followed in a blur, venues, tastings, flowers, endless lists. It was overwhelming and joyful, and more than I'd ever let myself imagine. But one detail haunted me. The invitations needed a line for parents of the bride. Robert and Linda Thatcher hadn't spoken to me in over 2 years. No birthday calls, no acknowledgement of my existence. I couldn't put their names there. They hadn't earned it. One evening, as I paced the Morrisons' living room, Eleanor found me. "What's weighing on you, sweetheart?" I told her about the invitation, about the blank line that felt impossible to fill. She sat beside me. "Do you remember something I mentioned once?" she asked, "about legal recognition for chosen family." I nodded slowly. "Adult adoption," Eleanor said gently. My heart raced. It's a legal process, consenting adults, a formal parent-child relationship, new birth certificate, new legal next of kin. That's real. Very real. I've guided many families through it. I looked at her, the woman who'd opened her home to me on the loneliest holiday of my life, who'd fed me Sundays and taught me pie crust and loved me without condition. "Eleanor," I whispered, voice breaking, "would you and Richard ever consider?" She pulled me into her arms before I could finish. "We've thought of you as our daughter since that first Thanksgiving," she said. "We were just waiting for you to be ready." The process took months, paperwork, court dates, signatures, but with Eleanor beside me, it felt ceremonial, not clinical. When the judge signed the final order, I became Tori Morrison. New birth certificate, new legal parents, a family in every sense of the word. The wedding was set for June. When the invitations went out, the line I'd once dreaded read proudly: "Parents of the bride, Richard and Eleanor Morrison." Of course, the Thatchers eventually found out. 3 months before the wedding, a text from Victoria, her first in nearly 3 years. "Did you know Tori is getting married?" I stared at it, then I blocked the number. A week later, my mother called 5 times in one day. I let every call go to voicemail. Finally, a text appeared. "Why didn't you tell us? We're your family, call me back immediately." I read it twice, then I deleted it. 3 years of silence, 3 years of pretending I didn't exist. And now they remembered me. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just tired. Legally, and in every way that mattered. "You stole our daughter." Richard didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "No," he said calmly, "we didn't steal anything. You gave her away. We simply picked up what you discarded." Linda recoiled as if struck. 5 years ago, Richard continued, steady and unflinching, "this young woman spent Thanksgiving alone in a restaurant because her own family told her she wasn't welcome. My wife saw her. We invited her to our table. We fed her. We listened to her. We treated her like she mattered." He stepped closer, his voice dropping, not in anger, but in certainty. "Do you know what she told us that night? She said she couldn't remember the last time she'd felt wanted, 27 years old, and she couldn't recall ever feeling chosen by her own family." Linda opened her mouth. Nothing came out. "We didn't take your daughter," Richard said. "We showed her what family looks like. Everything else was her choice." Then he turned to the room, to the guests frozen in silence. "This is my daughter's wedding day, the happiest day of her life. I will not allow anyone to take that from her." He nodded to the security guards waiting nearby. "Please escort them out." As the guards moved forward, Richard slipped an arm around my shoulders. "Tori is a Morrison," he said quietly, "and Morrisons protect their own. That's what a father does." Before anyone could move, I lifted my hand. "Wait." The room stilled. Linda looked at me with sudden hope, as if she believed I was about to save her from this moment. I walked toward my biological parents and stopped a step away. "Mom, Dad." The words felt unfamiliar, like a language I no longer spoke fluently. "There's something you need to understand." Linda lifted her chin. "What?" "I don't hate you." That wasn't what she expected. "I don't," I repeated. "I've accepted who you are. You're not monsters. You're just people who chose comfort over fairness. People who let one child disappear so the other could shine. Robert was crying openly now. Linda's face went rigid. But I've also accepted who I am, I continued, standing taller, and I deserve to be chosen, not as an afterthought, not as a burden, chosen first. I gestured toward the Morrisons. You didn't choose me, they did, and I choose them. The silence was absolute. Linda tried to speak. I stopped her with a gentle shake of my head. I'm not erasing you from my past. I'm just not giving you a seat at my table anymore. That isn't revenge, it's consequence. I turned to the guards. Goodbye. As they were escorted out, the room filled with applause, not for the spectacle, but for closure. The rest of the night was joy, pure, unguarded joy, dancing, laughter, cake crumbs on formal clothes. Marcus spun me across the floor until I was breathless, until the world narrowed to the warmth of his hands and the certainty of this life we were choosing together. The next morning, the messages began. Cousins, aunts, people who hadn't spoken to me in years. How could you do this to your mother? Family is family. You broke your father's heart. I deleted every one. Then came a message from my Aunt Patricia. I'm proud of you, it read. I always knew how they treated you was wrong. You deserved better. I cried over that one. Later that day, Linda posted a long, public lament about ungrateful children and lost loyalty. I didn't respond. That night, I blocked every remaining Thatcher connection, not out of anger, but out of peace. On the balcony of our honeymoon suite, Marcus wrapped his arms around me. You okay? I looked out over the vineyard, glowing gold in the sunset. I am, I said, really. For the first time, I wasn't carrying people who refused to carry me. I was free. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived, Victoria's handwriting, perfect, practiced. I read it once, then twice. It explained nothing, it apologized for nothing, it asked me to understand everyone except myself. I folded it carefully and put it away. Marcus came home to find me making dinner. She still doesn't get it, I said. Does that hurt? No, I answered honestly, it's not my job to teach her. Life moved forward, beautifully. Marcus and I bought a small Cape Cod near Boston, close enough for Sunday dinners at Richard and Eleanor's, far enough to breathe. I stepped into a job I loved. Marcus thrived, and then I was pregnant. Eleanor cried. Richard pretended not to. No one believed him. One afternoon, we painted the nursery sage green. Names? Eleanor asked. Emily, I said, Emily Grace Morrison. She hugged me tightly. I want her to carry the name of the family that chose her mother, I said. Eleanor smiled, and she always will. 5 years to the day after I'd eaten Thanksgiving alone, I sat at the head of a crowded table. Emily, 6 months old, was passed around like treasure. Laughter filled every corner. Richard stole pie. Eleanor caught him. Before dinner, Eleanor raised her glass. Tori. I stood, my daughter in my arms. 5 years ago, I thought I was unlovable, I said. Then someone said, no one should eat alone today, and everything changed. I raised my glass. To family, the ones we build, the ones who choose us, the ones who never let us sit alone again. To family, they echoed. And as Emily gurgled and laughter rang out, I felt it fully. Finally, I was home.